Good day. This presentation that I'm going to take you through is about performance-based instructional design and calculating a return on investment in training and coaching. As we know, for a long time, learning and development departments have been under pressure to demonstrate their value to business and operations. And they've struggled to do so because they found it difficult to identify any positive impact on operational performance for a couple of reasons. They haven't been able to establish a baseline in the operational environment and therefore measure change against it. Two, the training that they've typically delivered hasn't focused on the key levers of performance improvement. And three, there hasn't been a culture of measuring the performance impact of training. And these things have given rise to the perception that training is of a higher cost than it's worth in terms of the value it contributes. Right, so let's pick up and use the scenario of a short-term insurance company running an outbound sales operation. Let's start off by having a look at the value chain for the sales consultant. It's going to start off by receiving a lead, which will either be pushed to the consultant or they'll have to go and access it from a queue of leads, which in itself is a productivity factor. Once they've accessed the lead, they're going to dial and hopefully make a contact. Now, contact ability is not something that's within the hands of the consultant. It's more a factor of the way campaigns are set up. So this is something that's not really within the scope of a training impact. Once they've made contact, it might not be with the right person, in which case they have to schedule a recall or try again. But if it's with the right person, we'll call that a right party contact. Now the consultant has got through to the target audience or target person, and they're able to position the products and services. And that's what they will do. They will position, and in our case, they will give a quotation. And what we want to see is them move from positioning or quotation eventually through to a sale, and in this case, it's to a new policy that's opened. Now, not every sale is a quality sale. Some of them might be invalidated because of errors, underwriting issues, and various other factors. So there's a final measure with a bit of a lag time on it to measure the quality sales that that consultant was responsible for. Now, if that's then the value chain of that sales call, let's identify exactly where training can play a role. Right, so we've established that the volume of leads is something that they don't control, but the volume of leads that they work through is a factor of productivity. So that definitely is something that can be addressed through training and coaching. There's the first area. Getting through to somebody on the other end of the phone is not something that the agent controls, or for that matter, getting through to the right party. But once they get through to the right party, they need to use their knowledge of the product, their knowledge of underwriting and underwriting rules, their knowledge of the competition and of the customer to match the offering to the customer's needs and to provide them with a quote for the relevant product. So very definitely, this is a core skill of that agent. And to then be able to be as compelling and convincing and as accurate with their quotation in terms of having listened to the customer, they can convert that quote into a sale, which then leads into a new policy being taken out. And that again, in that conversion, is well within the responsibility of that consultant and can be impacted by training. And finally, the quality of that sale in terms of its completeness can be measured by with a lag factor by, for example, the premium income paid or generated on the first month or a policy not taken up. So there's a quality component directly attributable to training and coaching that can be measured. So if we have these different elements in the value chain of that insurance sales call, that we can unpack to identify the areas of impact of training, we can start to formulate the basis of a calculation for ROI. But first we need some target numbers. So let's put some fictitious target rates against these. If, for example, we want to achieve an overall conversion rate of 20% on the number of right party contacts or quotes that I get, then let's put some numbers to these different elements in the value chain. So let's just assume that my right party contact to quote ratio is 80%. In other words, for every person, target audience person I get through to, for 8 out of 10 of those people, I'm able to provide them with a quotation. Then of those, for 25% of those who I provide a quotation with, I'm able to get a sale. That means that my overall conversion rate of right party contacts to sales is 20%. And now I have a baseline to work with. If I then look at a productivity measure and I say that on the number of leads that I access, if for every hour I'm able to access 10 leads, or let's just reduce that and say I'm able to access 10 leads. Not all of them are going to be right party contacts, but if I look at my conversion rates, let's assume that of those 10 leads I can get through to 5 right parties. I now have a number to work with in terms of productivity, because without changing any of my conversion ratios, simply by accessing and working more leads per period of time, I will be able to make more sales. Or alternatively, without changing the number of leads that I access, so leaving my productivity unchanged, my effectiveness and conversion can improve, so I can increase the number of sales I make off the same number of leads. Both of those will be measures of impact of training on operational performance. So with those parameters and elements understood, let's now have a look at how we would calculate a return on investment for a training intervention. And I'm going to take you through the different components step by step, and we'll begin by having a look at the benefits. So all return on investments involve costs and benefits. When I look at the benefits, I need to account for the combination of improved productivity. So simply by doing more or working more leads in an hour, I will end up with more sales without changing my conversion rate, as well as by improving my sales skills, I can increase my conversion rate. And when I put both of those together, I have a significant impact potentially on revenue that's generated. At the same time, the cost per sale is reduced, because for the same cost for one individual, I'm now able to make more sales within an allotted period of time. So I have a revenue impact going up and I have a cost of sale impact going down. Then those collectively will make up the benefits. The cost of that will be my training intervention and what it costs and any related coaching. All right, so let's start off with the benefits. As I mentioned, there's going to be an increase in revenue driven by certain changes in behavior and skill, and there's going to be a reduction in cost driven by increased productivity. So using our example, the increased number of leads that I work and the increased conversion rate will lead to a combined increase in the number of sales that I make per hour. And I can measure that, measure it against the baseline, and I can determine how many that will be. So let's just say that I can increase my conversion rate from 20% to 22%, and I can increase the number of leads that I handle per hour from 10 to 12. I'll have to take those figures and combine them, and I would then have a look through any other areas of efficiency, for example, reducing errors that have an impact on my quality sales, and also making sure that potential sales are properly qualified and converted. So 2 other areas of improvement. Collectively, that's going to give me an increased number of sales through a performance improvement that's directly attributable to training. Then I have a look at attaching a rand value of the products that I'm selling to the increased number of sales, and I end up with a gross revenue number. And I can multiply that out to get increased revenue per hour, per day, per week, per month, and per year for any individual agent. So there I have the revenue side of my benefits. I do a similar thing to work out what the cost reductions will be. I first of all calculate what my average cost per sale will be, or cost per rand value of goods sold will be, and that's a fixed cost that I'm then apportioning over the number of sales that I make. So obviously the more sales I make, the lower the cost per sale will be. And I can calculate then what my reduced cost of sale will be through the increase in productivity. Now I add these together and I end up then with a gross benefit, and I have to look at the costs of training. So to calculate the cost of training, if I now think back to the performance-based instructional design methodology and all the steps I have to go through, I can determine or start with a useful framework. If it's content that's been developed from scratch, I'll work through the steps. I'll have a cost for an analysis, a cost for design, a cost for developing a blueprint, a cost for developing the material, a cost for piloting, a cost for any changes, and a cost for rolling the training material out. Each of those is a measurable cost. To that, I'm going to add some of my other training overheads, like the cost of facilities, the cost of facilitators, and any other training aids and tools that I may use. And that will give me a combined cost, which I'll try and separate between a once-off cost of developing the material and ongoing costs of delivering that material. So I now have measured benefits and I have measured costs, and what I now need to do is to convert those into a net benefit that I can use to determine what is my return on investment. So when I pull those figures together, I'll add up all my benefits, I'll make sure that they're annualized, I'll do the same with my costs, I'll subtract the benefits, the cost from the benefits to get net benefits, and I end up with a number. And that number I will use to determine what my return on investment is, which is essentially the net benefits divided by the costs, and I'll get a percentage. So in our particular scenario, we end up with what looks like an expensive investment in a training initiative, with an initial cash outflow in the first year, generating such good returns in the second and the third year through improved productivity and improved conversion rates that we end up with a return on investment of 180%. And when we start to use this language and this methodology to communicate the impact of training on business performance and operational performance, it makes it so much easier for training departments to communicate the value of what they do based on the measurable impact of training and coaching on performance. Thank you.